On today's Locked On Jayhawks, college game day in town. It's another big one for the Jayhawks looking to bounce back. We preview KU versus Baylor.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on at KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk, at least for Friday, the final day that I'll be working there. But we'll continue to be having shows here on Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the action. And on today's show, we are previewing the Kansas Baylor game. It's top 15 showdown in Allen Fieldhouse. College game day in town with ESPN. We'll get to our top storylines of the game. We'll get to our Baylor scouting report, our matchups of the game, players to watch, and Hawks to Soar for KU. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Kansas versus Baylor. It's a 5 o'clock tip-off on Saturday in Allen Fieldhouse. Obviously, one of the storylines, college game day, is going to be in town. Feels like usually there's like one yearly visit to Allen Fieldhouse for college game day. It's the combination of, obviously, a best place to watch a college basketball game. You have great fans in attendance, but being in the Big 12 too, like you're going to have so many great matchups that it's just going to work out that, there's probably due to be one or two games that you might end up on college game day that year, maybe one on the road or, one at home or something like that. And so back they come. Obviously, this adds a little bit of fanfare and hype and something that the fans can kind of get into and everything. So always a good time when that happens, and that'll be exciting once again for this one. This is two of the best Big 12 programs over the last decade-ish, I would say. When you look to Bill Self taking over at Kansas, the kind of early years, the biggest, I guess, contenders for winning the Big 12 kind of year in and year out, you had some Oklahoma teams in there. Texas was certainly kind of the one that the first handful of years with Bill Self in the Big 12. And then you go into the kind of new version of the Big 12 when Missouri and A&M leave and stuff, and West Virginia and Iowa State become two of the other big contenders. Baylor becomes kind of a very good team. And then all of a sudden over the last like 5 or 6 or 7 years, Baylor becomes kind of the top contender along with Kansas, and obviously wins a national title a few years ago, had that team that also was going to get a 1 seed along with Kansas in the 2020 COVID year. So this has been just a very fun matchup between two schools that have turned into, in the case of Baylor, one of the best programs in the Big 12 consistently over the last recent history here and what they've been able to do. And so every time they meet, it does become a little bit more interesting. I think also Bill Self versus Scott Drew. I think there are interesting parts there because, this is two coaches who have a national championship. Maybe if you're, drafting Big 12 coaches or something, Bill Self goes 1, maybe Scott Drew goes 2. And that becomes interesting from back to the idea of like the two best programs. Beyond that, I think it is also two guys that, I don't know, maybe they get along publicly, but I do not think Bill Self and Scott Drew get along privately. And I have heard many stories from people on the recruiting pipeline that there is no bigger like negative recruiter than Scott Drew, that he will act all happy in one way in public, but then once it gets behind closed doors in recruiting, he's a big time negative recruiter of other schools, including Kansas. So I think there is a little bit of maybe animosity there, which maybe makes it interesting. I remember last year in the game that was in Allen Fieldhouse, I thought this was like the lamest thing to do ever. Baylor was up by, it was like 15 points, 12 points, whatever it was. It was obviously a great first half for them that didn't carry over into the second half. And they were up by double figures at halftime. And despite being up double figures at halftime in Allen Fieldhouse against Kansas, Scott Drew was like on the halftime report. Okay, it was 45-32. So they were up 13. On the halftime reporter interview, he was just like complaining about the officials and the calls and all that sort of stuff. And one, we've gone over this. I'm going to do this later in the year. We'll show the foul discrepancy from, I guess, free throw discrepancy or whatever you want to look at, home versus away. Kansas has not been like the top team in the Big 12 over the last couple of years. And actually, Baylor right now is one of the best ones at it. Like, this whole idea is so stupid, and it's just a confirmation bias type thing to begin with. But if you're up by 13 at half in Allen Fieldhouse and you're going to complain about the refs, like, what message does that send to your team in the locker room? Anyway, I'm not a big Scott Drew guy, as you can tell. So moving on from that. The Big 12 title race continues on here with both these teams. I mean, I think right now Baylor has been the hottest team, I guess you could say, in the Big 12 because they have the longest winning streak at 3. You get 3 straight wins in the Big 12, you feel like you did something really right because that's about as good as it can go right now. They won 3 to start, lost 3 after that, then they've won their last 3, and they have really emerged back in the Big 12 title race after being 3-3. Right now you got Houston up at the top of things at a 7-3 record to this point in time. And then Iowa State has really acquitted themselves well. And if Iowa State would have won that game at Baylor, then all of a sudden they'd be in the driver's seat and would have a couple of really nice road wins here in a row. But they're certainly one that I view as a real contender, and they don't even have to go into Lawrence to play at Allen Fieldhouse. And because of that, Houston's minus 155, Iowa State's plus 350, Kansas is plus 750, Baylor is plus 900 to win the conference. And then after that, there's a big drop off. Everybody is plus 2,500 or below. So both these teams still in the Big 12 title race. Whoever loses this game, it's a big step back. Whoever wins this game, you feel like you take a nice step forward. But it probably means more for Kansas because you have to hold serve at home. For Baylor, you still get a return trip in Waco to try to beat Kansas. For the Baylor scouting report, they are 17-5 on the year, 6-3 in Big 12 play. They're ranked 13th in the AP poll. Right now, they are basically a top 15 team on KenPom. They are just outside of it. They are ranked 16th in the country there on KenPom. In the non-con, they had some really nice wins. Neutral court win against Auburn and Florida. They had a weird 24-point loss to a Michigan State team that was one of the preseason favorites this year, but it's just completely tanked. And I guess Michigan State's 14-9, and they're still like top 20 on KenPom. But still, based on what you thought Michigan State would be, that was kind of a weird one. And then they had a close-ish neutral loss to Duke. So, I mean, those are fine losses and everything, and those really nice wins. Auburn is ranked in the top 5 on KenPom, so that one really sticks out for them. In league play, like I said, it's been a game of runs. They had the 3-0 start, wins over Oklahoma State, BYU, and Cincinnati, then 3 straight losses coming from Kansas State in overtime, Texas, and then triple overtime to TCU. All 3 of those losses were very close, though. They easily could have won any of them. And now they have 3 straight wins at UCF versus Iowa State and versus Texas Tech. So they're starting to get things rolling again with those last 2 being top 25 victories. What they do well, this is a top 5 offense in the country. They're number 4 on KenPom's adjusted offensive efficiency. And the reason why, they are first in 3-point percentage in the country at 41.2%. They are also top 80 in 2-point offense. Because of the 3-point offense, it creates a lot of gravity on the outside, leads to some openings on the inside, and they shoot very efficiently at the rim. They're top 15 overall in effective field goal percentage. They're also top 3 in avoiding turnovers in Big 12 only games, so top 3 among the 14 teams in the league. Overall, they've been more average, including non-con play, but in league play, they've been good at that. They're top 20 in the country in offensive rebounding rate, and in Big 12 only games, they're top 2. They're also top 30 in getting to the free throw line and top 2 in Big 12 only games in getting free throws. Defensively, they've been above average at forcing turnovers and getting non-steal turnovers, and average to above average in defensive rebounding rate and not sending opponents to the free throw line. What they don't do well, though the threes are, astronomical on the year at over 40%, they are at just 33.5% in Big 12 play, which ranks 7th in the Big 12. So basically middle of the pack. They're also 7th in the league in Big 12 only games in 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, free throw percentage, and effective field goal percentage. So even though they've on the overhaul been a great shooting team in Big 12 play, they've been just kind of an average shooting team. Does that tell you that that's what they are now that, play is getting more real? Does that tell you that there's a reversion coming where they're going to start shooting really hotly over this back half of Big 12 play? I don't know. Part of the reason, though, why the season-long versus Big 12 one is what they are is they went a combined 46 of 76 or 60.5% from 3 in their games against Mississippi Valley State, Nicholls State, and UMKC. All 3 are outside the top 270. That'll certainly help the numbers. They did still, have other games where they went off. 14 of 25 against Florida, 12 of 23 against Iowa State, 11 of 22 against Texas, 8 of 18 against Duke, 9 of 19 against Auburn, and so on. But that obviously helps kind of buoy that a little bit. They're only 76th in the country and 8th in Big 12 only games in KenPom adjusted efficiency, though. So that hasn't been a strength for them. They rank outside the top 140 in 3-point defense, 2-point defense, and effective field goal percentage defense. In Big 12 only games, they are 11th of the 14 teams in 2-point defense. They're 12th in 3-point defense and 11th in effective field goal percentage defense. So this has not been a very good defense. They're only 11th in such games in block rate and have given up a lot of 3-point opportunities and attempts. The other thing is weirdly, they have not done well closing games. Whether it's been losing some of those close games or even some games that they've won like Texas Tech, they very easily could have won by more. So that'll be something to keep an eye on if this one is close down the stretch. The player personnel, Toledo transfer Ray J. Dennis has really translated well. 13.8 points, 6.4 assists, 3.9 rebounds, 1.4 steals. He's got 50, 39, 70 shooting splits, very efficient. 6'5 freshman Jacoby Walter, another guard who's excelled. They brought in Keontae George last year as a freshman. He had a good year. Walter doing the same, 14.2 points, 4.5 rebounds. He's shooting 34% from three, only 39% from the floor, but still a good player as a freshman. 6'5 sophomore guard Langston Love tacks on 11.5 points per game. He's shooting 49% from three this year and 80% at the foul line. He's up to 53% from three in Big 12 play, one of the best shooters in the conference. 6'4 junior guard Jaden Nunn gives them another guard who can fill it up. 9.8 points, 2.3 assists, 1.3 steals. He's shooting 41% from three. So those four guards, Nunn, Love, Walker, and Dennis, they're all going to combine to play the 1 to 3 in different lineups and variations. And total it all up, all four of those average almost 50 points per game on 40% from three. Then at the 4, you have a 6'9" wing in Jalen Bridges, who gets 10.7 points, 4.6 rebounds, very good efficiency, 45, 40, 86 shooting splits. All four of Bridges, Love, Walter, and Dennis rank top 10 in the Big 12 in offensive BPR per Evan Miyakawa's website. So this is one of the best offensive teams in the country. Their center position, as you had Jonathan Chachua coming back from the season, and you thought, okay, maybe last year he gets a little bit of play. What is he going to do another year back from the injury? Well, it's actually been Yves Missi, the freshman center, who's been excellent. 7 foot, 235-pound center, big-time breakout guy, 10.5 points, 5.8 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, shooting 64% from the floor in 22 minutes per game. He's spelled by Josh Ojianwuna. I'm probably mispronouncing both guys' names, who is shooting 79% from the floor. He's only blocked 8 shots in 352 minutes, but he's actually Baylor's best defender by defensive BPR, though there's not a single Baylor player in the top 50 for defensive BPR on Evan Miyakawa's website in the Big 12. And then maybe you could see some Caleb Lohner at the backup four. More so their centers offensively, good rim rollers, will throw down dunks, lobs, offensive rebounds, putbacks, stuff like that. They'll get the occasional, hook shot look or look in the post, but just a couple good kind of bruisers, athletic players, rim runners, stuff like that on the inside. Let's continue on with our matchups of the game and Hawks to Soar on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. And with FanDuel, you can get pretty creative with what you want to do. You want to build your own same-game parlay with Patrick Mahomes over passing yards, and you can also get in on some player to score a touchdown, like you can go with Isaiah Pacheco. You could bet somebody to win Super Bowl MVP, right? You want to go a little further down the aisle. I know the quarterbacks always win the awards, but what if the Chiefs defense shows up in a game like this and you win 17-14, you have a defensive touchdown? Okay, what if Chris Jones has 3 sacks? Well, he's 110-1 odds to win the Super Bowl MVP. What about you want to go further down the list? George Karlaftis is 490-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. Trent McDuffie can have a pick 6, 600-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. You can get fun with it. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That is FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Matchups of the game on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Number 1, defending the perimeter for KU basketball. 4 of Baylor's 5 losses this year feature single-digit made threes. And even in some of those, they've shot actually okay efficiently or good efficiently, but they've only made single digits. The thing is, when you look at the Baylor offense, yes, they are very efficient shooting at the rim. 69.6% shooting at the rim. That ranks 95th percentile. But in Big 12 games, they're only in the 48th percentile in the amount of shots they're getting at the rim per field goal attempt per game. So they're not shooting a ton of them in that zone. KU also does a good job of preventing teams from shooting them in that zone. And the reason why is they're more three-point reliant, and the reason they're so efficient is because they kind of pick and choose when they do go inside to the rim because you're getting wide open ones sometimes because of how much emphasis teams have to put on the outside. That'll leave maybe an open driving lane or an open cutter or possibly one of the centers to kind of work one-on-one on the inside. And that's why that would be. So point being, even though they do have other ways of scoring, the three-point offense is the biggest bulk of what they do and how they get their points. So if you can limit what they do there, even if they have a good game, it's like defending Michael Jordan. You could have a good defensive game where Michael Jordan goes for 28 points. It's not about completely shutting him down. There's only so much you can do. It's going to be hard to completely shut down the Baylor three-point offense, but can you limit it? Can you make it more difficult? Can you make it have an average game, a below average game, as opposed to one where they go off? And as far as where Baylor does get their threes from, it's everywhere in terms of efficiency. They're shooting 40.7% above the break threes and 42.7% in the corner threes. In conference play, though, it's basically 34%, 33% respectively in those two, but still, they're taking more from the corner when you look at the number of where they're coming from. They rank in the 95th percentile in amount of corner threes per field goal attempt in the nation per CBB analytics. So specifically, got to chase them out of the corner, got to chase them off the three-point line in general, contest everything, go over screens, chase hard around screens, work through things, switch quick and hard, make things as difficult as possible for them. If they go 9 of 20 from three, that's still 45% from three-point range. That's a good percentage, but that still gives Kansas a real chance to win in this game. So if you can limit them to single-digit threes. Number 2 is KU forcing turnovers. In games where Baylor turns it over 15% of the time or more, they are 9-5. In games where Baylor turns it over less than 15%, they are 8-0. Okay. Now, the interesting part is a 15% turnover rate is not even that bad. Baylor on the year is at a 17% turnover rate, which ranks just outside the top 150 in the country. So it's about, right around average, above average nationally. The Kansas defense forces a 17% turnover rate. That barely ranks inside the top 200 nationally. So 15% is not like a huge number. 15%, if you had an offense with a 15% turnover rate, you would rank top 60 in the nation. So again, that's not like a bad turnover number. But for a Baylor team that doesn't defend well, they have to make shots, they have to make threes, and they have to get up shots to counter. They get a lot of shots up because of they're going to get a bunch of offensive rebounds, and some of that's going to come on long misses on the offensive glass with the three balls, but they are a good offensive rebounding team. They always kind of have been with Scott Drew. Another way to do this is if they're lowering their turnover numbers and they're getting offensive rebounds and they're hitting threes, it's just the math starts to add up in the points per possession and everything like that becomes difficult. I want to see Kansas force a 20% plus turnover rate or higher, which they've done 6 times this season. You go out and do that, I think you're going to feel good about where you're at. Number 3 is defensive rebounding and outlet passes. Baylor plays at one of the slowest tempos in the country, so speeding them up, at least in the conference, I should say, could make them more uncomfortable. I think on KenPom, they rank either 13th or 14th in terms of their tempo rating. Yeah, they're in terms of average possession length offensively 14th, in terms of tempo rating 13th in the Big 12 only games. So speed them up, play the game to your liking. That said, maybe Baylor would be comfortable playing because if you have a bunch of guards who shoot a lot of threes, maybe they actually would like the game speed up. I don't know. But Kansas averages 13 fast break points per game in conference play. That ranks 88th percentile in the country. Baylor's getting just 6.2 fast break points per conference game, which is in the 12th percentile in the country per CBB analytics. Still, Baylor crashes the offensive glass hard. Kansas has to do a good job on the boards to avoid giving up second chance points. Baylor gets 12.1 second chance points per game. That's in the 82nd percentile in the country. Beyond that, if you can grab those defensive rebounds, not only are you preventing those second chance points, preventing those extra 3-point shots, when they're selling out for offensive rebounds, which they do it sometimes, if you can still get the defensive rebound, it leads to such an advantage for you. It's almost like in football, you have a defense who is blitzing you. If your running back picks up what would have been the free linebacker blitzing through the middle, all of a sudden now you get that extra bit of time and they don't have as much coverage on the back end that you should be able to dice them apart. That's kind of how it is. If you can pick up the blitz, you're going to get some extra transition opportunities because they have more numbers forward. KU's been a good transition passing team. Hunter Dickinson's been excellent at getting outlet passes out and quickly and down the court. So maybe this is something the KU can take advantage of just fine. Player matchup here is Hunter Dickinson versus Yves Missi / the Baylor Bigs. It's kind of a clash of styles. Baylor Bigs are good rim runners, powerful, athletic bigs, without much ability to kind of stretch the floor and shoot a bunch of jump shots or shoot threes or anything. Dickinson is more of the finesse big man. He can stretch the floor, shoot it, but is less athletic, less quick than the Baylor big man. Does Missi hurt Kansas on pick and rolls and rim runs? Does Dickinson hurt Baylor on pick and pops? Also, Baylor in conference play ranks in the 96th percentile in preventing shots at the rim. So what is that going to do for the Kansas offense, which typically thrives there and loves getting shots on the inside? Either way, we have two centers who are really good and have such a pulse on each team's success. I also will mention this is probably a game that Johnny Furphy needs to be focused and play pretty decently to well on the defensive end, because with Baylor having all those guards and Kansas switching, they're going to hunt certain matchups to try to get guards on Johnny Furphy. And he did a good job in the Houston game with that. K-State game, maybe not as much. That's going to be important in this Baylor game. All right, we'll finish up here with Hawks to Soar, KU players we think can have big games for the Jayhawks on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Our Hawks to Soar, we're going to go with Kevin McCullar. He had a tough game against Kansas State. The shots weren't falling, missed that layup at the end of the first half, 1 of 5 on free throws, couldn't connect in some key moments for KU, and not one of his better games. I expect him to bounce back. He is a senior leader on the team. He's a really good basketball player. I think it's just fair to assume he's going to counter off of that and be very focused in this game. The Baylor guards are not great defenders. They're very good offensive players, but it's not a collection of great defenders. So there should be opportunities there for Kevin. Baylor gives up a good amount of above the break threes. Teams have shot them at a 36% clip against them this season. Kevin leads Kansas with 2.5 above the break 3-point attempts per game, and he is shooting 34.6% on those 3-point attempts this season. Combine that with the bounce back, I think Kevin has a big game. KJ Adams, I'm going to go with him too. Baylor's content giving up those little floaters and mini jump shots from kind of the elbow free throw line in the paint that aren't quite at the rim. And teams have shot well against Baylor at them, 46% on those shots. In conference play, Kansas as a team is shooting 47% on those shots that are in the paint but not at the rim, which ranks 95th percentile in the country. And KJ Adams is a huge reason why. He's taken them at a high volume. He's gone 24 of 51 for 47.1%. So I think KJ should be able to hit a few of those shots coming off a game in which he was in foul trouble a little bit. Obviously, he can be somebody who can dice up a defense in multiple ways with kind of his passing ability also. But yeah, KJ Adams will be my other pick for Hawks to Soar. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for a KU Baylor recap.